Okay, want to welcome everyone to the June 15th Committee of the Whole. All trustees, I believe, are present. Is that correct, George?
Yeah, except Ryan is not going to make it tonight, and I don't see Rick Snagowski yet, but he said he was going to. Maybe he'll be a couple minutes late.
Okay, so I guess with the exception of Ryan and Rick, we will kick off our meeting. First up is the Briarcliff Estates Soundwall. George, you want to take the lead on that?
Yeah, no, I'll just go through quickly since we've been through it. First, Mr. Mayor, we're going to have 4 agenda items here tonight. We actually do have an executive session we added, so we'll try to be a little efficient here tonight. Similar to last few meetings, you'll have an opportunity to send in comments prior to the meeting. We did not have any. You can watch this on the Village's YouTube channel, and then also you could register and be part of the meeting. We will have an opportunity for audience participation, if not during the meeting, but towards the end of the meeting as well, for the 3-minute participation period. So yeah, I will, and then we'll go through the directions again towards the end of the meeting for public comment, but basically similar to last few meetings, use the raise your hand feature, and we'll unmute you and let you allow you to speak to the board. As I'm letting more people in, hold on just a second. So as the mayor mentioned, the first item here for business, again, it's a workshop for discussion, is the Briarcliff Estates Town Tollway Sound Mitigation discussion. Real quick, we do have members of the HOA board on with us tonight. I just want to, I'll say a few words, kind of set it up and turn it over to their presentation that they included with the packet. Over the last several years, the village has been working with tollway representatives along with the HOA and assisting residents from Briarcliff on receiving noise mitigation. There's a long history with the subdivision and the tollway, and then the HOA has been vigilant in working with the tollway for the last 10 plus years on a potential project. It should be noted that while we have other residents and subdivisions who've asked for mitigation, I will say, firsthand and work with the mayor, the HOA for Briarcliff have taken the initiative of being organized and working with the tollway, also with some leadership at the state level and the village on seeing what they can do to bring a project to fruition. Over a year ago, we received formal notice from the state, or from the tollway, excuse me, that they would be willing to fund a project regarding the Briarcliff subdivision. It fit within certain parameters that would allow them to fund it to a certain level, as long as the project met all their requirements. And the other stipulation is that the village or its designated agency, I should say, runs the project. The tollway does not want to be in the business of building the wall, constructing it, and inspecting it. They would provide funding to the village, and the village would be responsible for constructing the wall or its designated agency. So we brought this up about August of last year, and several of the board members expressed an interest in working with the board, the HOA board, but wanting to have the HOA put a little bit more work into it and run the project themselves. The village could be, a conduit in terms of financing. The tollway has required that they work with the village. We can't just completely pawn this off on the HOA. They want to work with a governmental entity that is willing to receive the money from the tollway and expense it, for the overall project. So that we will be involved regardless. But last time we met, we asked the board to kind of take a look at it again and see what they can do on their own, contract out with their own contractors, if there's any easements that are required to work with the neighbors. We will support as needed, but we definitely would love to see the HOA take a greater role in taking it over. And to their credit, they had a couple meetings recently, and I'll Faraz, if I can turn it over to you, I'll try to unmute you, and maybe you can kind of go through what you guys put together as a subdivision, how this could work to align everybody's interest. You're unmuted.
Thanks, George. Yeah, so appreciate first of all, appreciate all the support from you, George, and the mayor and the village to help us get here today. It's been a long road, and 10 years is not a short period of time to get this done. So we've met, and I think what we'd like to take the board through today is kind of three perspectives. We've met, and I think what we'd like to take the board. There's an echo.
Yeah,
Thanks.
you know what? I got you. I muted somebody else, so maybe that'll help. Go ahead.
Thanks. So I think there's three real things we want to address, and one is we want to ensure that the village sees that we have the curb appeal of the subdivision in perspective. We want to make sure that the village understands that we don't want to have any additional liability or burden on the village, and then how we plan on getting the what we're going to call a fence or a sound abatement wall built. So from the first perspective, this is the wall. It's approved by IDOT, and comes in multiple colors, but I think the key things here that it's a maintenance-free lifetime warranty wall. So I think aside from natural disaster or a vehicle hitting it, I think the wall should withstand. I think these are the ones that you'll see along I-88 being built today, and along I-80 as well. So, we'll have our architectural review committee. We'll make sure that the color of the wall fits the aesthetics of the neighborhood and whatever options are available. But for a 12-foot fence that's going to go in the back of the neighborhood along through 55, I think this will be a nice addition, even when looking over from the highway. From a size perspective, I think initially we had about 1,000 feet. Then looking in, there's a couple lots that sit behind a berm, so we're about 875. And based on budget, we'll see if we can continue to extend the wall behind the lot that the village owns, considering that lot may or may not, well, actually cannot be built on. So not sure if it'll make a huge impact. So this distance could get shortened a little bit more once we finalize with the builder. But all in all, the goal, what I'm trying to show here is that, we're trying to work within the budget given by the tollway. So from the village's perspective, I think the big two statements we want to make is that we want to leverage the village as a conduit to the tollway and eliminate liability for the village. We know that's a huge concern. Budgets are tight, and we don't want to create any issues for the village. So three perspectives. We want to finalize the agreement with the tollway. The tollway will only work with another government organization or entity, and I think that's the biggest ask that we have for the village is let's finalize the IGA from the tollway to secure the funding, just so we can move forward with the project. From there, since the funding has to be managed by the village, that's all we ask from that perspective is we'll coordinate the construction, we'll be the project manager, so to speak, as an HOA, and the village will administer the funding based on the payment terms that we agree to with the builders. Obviously, we want to make sure that we're only paying for things that get done. So I think that also helps alleviate some burden. And then once the wall is built, essentially there's no responsibility or liability to the village. It's the HOA will take full responsibility from there. And that includes completing the construction. So we'll work on securing the easements. We'll work on getting the permits as necessary. Hopefully we can work together on making sure that the fees are as minimal as possible, just because we're working within a tight budget. And then we'll pull our own bids to get it built. Once it's complete, we'll insure it. So we have a wall at the front along 127th. So we have experience in that, and we have some quotes from our insurance company to get that done. And fortunately for our association, it won't impact our HOA fee. So that's a positive. And then lastly, we'll be responsible for any ongoing maintenance if needed. The manufacturer does state it's a maintenance-free wall and offers a lifetime warranty. So that gives us as an HOA some assurance or some, I guess, good feelings about the long-term impact of the wall. So in short, I tried to keep it short and sweet and simple, but happy to answer any questions from the board.
Thanks, Faraz. No, appreciate, the presentation as well as just your entire, HOA and community. You guys have been, working at this hard. And, I think, this is probably, I don't know, multiple times you've met with us, to say the least, and you continue to, step up, because, there are other, there are other communities, other subdivisions that are looking for this, and you guys are setting the stage. Obviously, this has to be something that needs the HOA and the ongoing work on it. So again, appreciate that. As far as on the insurance side, when you say no liability to the village, can you just, my only question is, can you just expand on that? Car hits it, tornado hits it. How does that all work as far as getting that resurrected and fixed?
Yeah, I think because the wall will sit on essentially private property, with the easement belonging to the HOA, similar to a brick wall that we have along 127th when you enter the subdivision. Actually, I think it was a few years after the subdivision was completed, there was a drunk driver that hit the wall, and we had it rebuilt after that. So, I think we'll address it in the same way if that ever occurs.
Okay, so if that driver was uninsured, you have the backstop to make sure it gets fixed. Okay, great. That's really all I have for now. If any of the other trustees have a question, feel free or comment.
This is Stapleton. I've got a question. If there is a cost overrun from the builder, does the HOA pick up the tab on that?
So in theory, yeah, but we don't have the means to do that. So we're going to have to manage it and just kind of set the bar and say, hey, if you have an overrun, we can't afford it. It is what it is. But we wouldn't try to. Unfortunately, that's always saying this is the amount in the account. This is what you have to work with. So that's definitely going to be a difficult thing to manage from our perspective. But I think as long as they understand we have a finite amount of money and there's no way of going back to the well, hopefully that's enough to get it done.
Okay, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah, and Ron too, it's going to be important for the IGA with the tollway to be, the language needs to be tight on that. Mike couldn't make the meeting tonight, but he'll be looking at the very basic IGA that we had from a couple months ago. And last thing we want to do is to accept the money, approve a contract, or the HOA approves a contract, then there's an overrun. So we just got to make sure that that's all tight. But yeah, we try to go back to the tollway to ask for more funding, and this is really, it's maxing out what their policy tells us that they can pay. So I think the total is $396,000. So contractor will have to work within that amount of money. Trustee Maher had a question.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. The contract with the contractor, is that going to be a village contract or is that a homeowners association contract?
HOA.
And when we get the money from the tollway authority, are we just handing it over to the homeowners association, or
No.
How's that working?
I don't think that the tollway would be okay with that. I think you'd have to escrow it somehow, and then we'd have to say, hey, builder A or contractor A for job X did their job, and they've completed, and we're okay, and this is the payout, something like that.
Okay. So I guess from my perspective, I like the arrangement in general that you guys have worked to. I think this is a much better arrangement than we had when we were talking earlier. Sorry, I wanted to start off with that. I just jumped into the questions. So
no worries.
Sorry about that. So then this wall though is, even from the beginning, when it's under construction, it's never of ownership of the village then, right?
Correct.
Even from once, okay. Okay, and then has this gone to your homeowners association for a vote, or has the whole association been updated on this, or is it just the board that's knowledgeable of this?
So the impacted homes are aware that we're working on this. I think because there's no impact to the assessment, we haven't had to put it a vote. But I think if there's going to be any changes to the lines or the easements, we'll have to make sure that at least everybody's aware at a minimum. But the impacted homes are aware. I don't think they know exactly where we are today at this point, but they know that we're very close, and we just need to lock up a few things.
Okay, that's good. I guess I'd like some type of communication to go out to the rest of the homeowners association, since they're liable for, so if something happens, right? If there's a liability on the homeowners association. So I don't know if it necessarily needs a vote, but I would at least like to see some communication going out to the entire association, just so they're aware of what's going on. I think
Sure,
that's probably the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would be covered in our common area clause in our CC&R, so we probably just have to explain that our common areas are expanding.
Yeah, and then what's when they say lifetime warranty on the wall, what does that actually mean? I mean, obviously it's not forever, so what does that mean?
I don't have the black and white on it. That's just the documents that they sent over, lifetime warranty. Essentially, it won't, from my conversation with the VP at the company, it won't deteriorate, it won't erode, it won't crumble like some of the walls you'll see along the Dan Ryan or the Kennedy, the older concrete walls, maybe even on 284. So from that perspective, I think they're talking about the material and finish of the wall. Obviously, if there's natural disaster or some other major impact to it, that could have something, but I think naturally, if it just sits there, they'll guarantee it for life.
And then what about the contractor? Because the wall manufacturer will guarantee the materials, but not the installation. So is there some type of, I'm assuming you've picked a contractor, or are you guys going to go to bid?
Well, thanks to George and Ralph, I think they have a couple bids that they had done previously just to do some legwork. So we'll take some of that as a reference point. One of them was really recommended, and I really value Ralph's opinion on them. So we'll take that. We'll pull 2 other bids in and just compare. But we'll make the arrangement to get whatever warranty, however they warrant their construction.
Okay, and that's to me would be the last one, because obviously the installation I would expect to be big. So there's also a chance. I'm looking at these walls on 83 and some of the other roads, and to me it doesn't seem like there's failures in the wall as much as it is on the installation. So if you got a 2-year installation guarantee, and then those panels start sliding on you, obviously that could become pretty costly for you as well.
Yeah, I think the advantage that we have over some of the walls or fences used along the major roadways is we're going with a 12-foot, which requires a little bit different insulation. And according to the manufacturer, you can just use a fence installer for these. But once you get over 12 feet of wall into 14 and 16, then you have to have different equipment and a different level of GC.
Okay, those are my questions. Thanks.
Sure.
All right, anybody? I don't see anybody's.
Well, this is Ken McClaffrey. I'm just, Faraz, I'm just thankful you hung in there for 10 years, and hopefully we'll get this wall done. I fully support it. I always have. So
Thanks,
hopefully you'll get it done.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and what's and then just to reiterate, I think having a formal HOA that's done work in the past. I mean, essentially, this is going to be, you'll apply almost like it's a fence or a wall permit. We'll issue permits, and you've done it elsewhere in your subdivision. So that's a huge help, especially since we're not controlling the project, that you guys have a track record, you're organized. I think to Trustee Maher's point, though, last thing we want is, you're only have 10 or 11 homes that are affected. There's probably 150 in the subdivision. We'd hate for everyone to not want the wall, and only you 8 do. So maybe just a communication that goes out would help.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure that the people are aware of the changes.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, this is Trustee Kittredge. Being that I was a past resident over in Briarcliff, I'm fully aware of the importance of that wall. And I wasn't even near that wall, but I could hear it from even where I lived. So I do recall back in 2008, how important that was back then. So yeah, like Ken said, I'm glad you guys hung in there and you're going to get what you guys definitely need, I think, in that spot.
Thanks, Janelle. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Janelle. Do any of the other trustees have any other issues or concerns about moving forward with this?
John, this is Rick. I'm good with everything. I think Dave and Ryan covered my questions. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Rick. All right. Well, Frost, thanks again. Does anyone else from your HOA want to talk or have any words? Definitely, it's you're more than welcome to.
I don't think so. I think we're good.
All right.
Thanks for.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you and good luck.
Thanks for having us. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
We'll talk soon.
Take care.
That's it.
All right. 24 minutes in, we're down with one. Second up, we are on the budget amendment. Chris, you want to take the lead on this?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be real brief, but I just kind of wanted to give the board some, not only with the amendment, this is the end of our fiscal year, April 30th of this past year, the fiscal year 20 budget amendment. But I also just wanted to say where we are year to date. Probably about 90% of our accruals are in, so we can see some type of a picture of where we were. And as as we've discussed in the past, our top revenues were doing really, really well until COVID-19 hit. So here's just a quick snapshot of where we are. We had an amended budget in the beginning of the year, where we had some revenues that were coming in a lot stronger than we anticipated. So we amended the budget on some expenditures. We had that elevator repair that needed to be done. So we had the money in the general fund to move the money over. So we did amend the budget. As you can see, between the amended and the year-to-date amount, we fared fairly well, except for in the intergovernmental revenues where we have the sales tax and the income tax. Our permits, as Jason has said, we're doing excellent on permits. Some of the miscellaneous revenues are still the health insurance. We've done wonderful on claims, and so we had some reimbursement from our stop loss. So there's the miscellaneous revenues, and then everything else was fairly well in line with what our budget was. So anyway, so in the next slide, I kind of want to discuss a little bit what happened with retail sales tax. And as you can see, we were doing really, really well. And I look at the spreadsheet, we were doing really well until the last, and George, you want to go to the other one where it shows the lines? There you go. So to the last May and June, if you see the blue line, that is actually June is your March sales, and so May was your February. So May was in line with last year, and then June is starting to go down. And that is really just a couple days of when we closed. So, and as you can see, the lower line is actually the non-home rule sales tax. And of course, that's going to affect even more because the restaurants were closed. The other line was, even though the restaurants were closed, the grocery stores were still doing really, really well. So it's concerning that for next fiscal year, we don't know what July is going to bring. We did accrue a lot less in home rule sales tax and in the retail sales tax for the month. So July is actually going to be April. So it still will affect our fiscal year 20. But with everything being shut down, I envision that especially our non-home rule sales tax is going to take a dip under the 100,000 for the month. And then it will the retail sales tax will also dip. So that is one of the reasons why the estimate is lower than last year, and it's lower than what I've been saying that the retail sales tax. On the income tax, if George wants to the next one, and the income tax, once again, the per capita, IML actually came out in this last week. They came out with a revised for next year. They haven't really come out with too much. They kind of saying, oh, it should be still okay and everything, but they did revise it. They revised it $9 per person less than what their original. That affects us by almost $144,000 for next year. So I am more conservative. I have it a lot less than that, but that is just what they're thinking right now. They until unemployment, because they still have the unemployment, they still have the $600 a week with unemployment until everybody starts going back and that unemployment is gone, that $600 extra, we really won't know too much of the impact. But that's our estimate for right now for what we receive. If you, George, if you can see, the one with the purple boxes are actually what we've been receiving. And they're a month behind on accrual. So June was actually May, then income tax. The reason why the May is so much lower than the other spikes is because that's when the taxes are due April 15th, and then they give it to us on a per capita basis in May. Well, since they stretched it out to July, so July you'll see a larger spike since they stretched it out to July as well versus the April 15th. So anyway, and then now we go to the expenditures. We did very well on expenditures. A lot of the reasons why is at the end, we had a couple capital projects out there that we just decided not to do. And they amounted to almost $75,000 on there. And then as well, the other lower in expenditures was public works because they did not have the snow, the snow plowing. We had a very good season. The reason why you see some of these jumps, like with Public Works last year versus this year, we had a couple large equipment purchases that were actually ordered at the beginning of the year. So they did, by the time the COVID-19 hit, we didn't stop any of those capital purchases. So that's where you have 19, a lot less than 20. But everybody was within their budget. I moved the budget amendment around the amount. If you want to look at the detail, we have the details. But a lot of the stuff is with, basically, I didn't like add any expenditures, and mostly if I added an expenditure, I took either a revenue or I took an expenditure from a different area. So really just a summary of what the general fund, the first through the third quarter were, everything was on track with budget, a lot higher, sales tax was higher, permit revenues were higher, income tax, investment income was higher, developer fees, the health insurance fee reimbursement that we talked about, vehicle stickers, we have a 90% compliance right now. So we're hopefully, we're starting off the sticker revenue right now, hopefully we'll be at the same 90% compliance rate. The fourth quarter, that's basically what happened. Sales tax, the income tax, video gaming, they're not open. We don't get any revenue whatsoever. So, and I didn't write that down, even our investment income, they change it every single quarter, but now with the Fed funds rates being lower, that's also going to take a hit. So we ended the general fund, we're estimating about $405,000 revenues over expenditures. And that is 1% less of our expenditures than budgeted. So, and then 2%, about 2 to almost 3% more favorable in revenues. Last year, we thought maybe we should move that money over to some pensions. This year, I would really suggest that we leave it in the general fund. We'll be probably at about 38% of our fund balance. That 8% is around about $650,000 that maybe we could use for next year if the economy really, if we're really going to get hurt on income tax and sales tax. So I really suggest we should maybe leave it in there and look at it next year and then maybe move the money next year. I did want to show a little bit of the cash investments by fund. We always, when we send it out to you on the report, we kind of just give you a snapshot where we were at. Here I kind of showed where we were at in 2019 of 430 and where we're at in 2020. So as you see, we're very healthy in the general fund. We still have our working cash fund. The other items that I want to say, the water and sewer fund, that is because we have the bond. So we have the bond money sitting out there. But our infrastructure fund, our infrastructure fund, which used to be the road improvement fund, several years ago, we were down to like 15,000. So we're back up with a healthy balance. We're doing a lot more roads this coming year than we did last year. So we are doing that. So we are, I would just, we're healthy, but there's going to be some concerns with the economy. And then the 21 challenges, as we said before, it's going to be the revenues, retail sales, income tax. And it's interesting because every single, I'm on a lot of websites, webinars, how to fill out grants. All the grants are for expenditures related to PPE. Not one we've gotten yet that will be on revenue loss. So, so that's going to be our challenges in the next couple of months to see when things open up. Are they going to, how are our revenues going to rebound? Even, the one is the non-home rule sales tax one. So, and then I think there's one more slide, right, George?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, and then we did receive just a couple days ago, last week, we received the preliminary for the EAVs. And as you can see, our EAV did increase. However, the reassessments actually went down, almost 1%. And then the new growth, we normally go between 10 and 15 million was new growth, and this was 17. So, and I actually budgeted 14 million. So we're up 2.6. So our growth has really helped us on with our EAB.
Thanks, Chris. And, just to follow up too with, the COVID expenses and the CARE Act and the counties, and we're lucky enough to be in 3 of them, but primarily Cook, obviously we all know the counties are all sitting on a significant amount of cash regarding COVID. I think Cook County is sitting on, I think, 440 million. They haven't really laid out a great plan yet on how villages and towns in Cook County will apply for the funding. More than likely, though, the counties have a lot of expenses themselves with the hospitals and the healthcare facilities. So still remains to be seen. I would say, Chris, you're probably right. It's going to be maybe minimal reimbursements. So we'll keep looking at it though and applying for other grants as things come aboard.
Chris, this is Ron Stapleton. Has the IML given us any idea of what the motor fuel tax is going to be?
They did lower it. I have to go look. They did lower it, but not as low as I had anticipated. The reason why I haven't really touched the motor fuel tax is because in the upcoming budget, I didn't take really into account that additional amount because I was scared that Pritzker might use that to balance the budget because he kind of gave it to us and then might take it away. And then also we just received $175,000 as a 3-year plan of his capital plan as well. So actually with the motor fuel tax, and we have a pretty nice healthy balance, I have not really, I know it's less, but it's not going to be that significant like the income tax was.
Okay, thank you.
I have the dollar amount right here. It's kind of nice that I can have it at my fingertips. Okay, so they did their new forecast has gone down $4.85, and that'd be $77,000 for us. But we have that $175,000 that we budgeted. So $77,000 will go down for us.
Hey,
Okay.
Chris. Oh, thanks, Ron. Hey, Chris. George, can you go back to the sales tax? The growth. Why? So you're saying May sales tax is March totals, correct?
No, June is March totals.
I'm sorry, June is March totals. So how do we have June totals already?
June, they receive, they give us in the beginning of June, they give us the
Oh,
money.
Okay,
So
so
because-
for March, got it.
Yeah.
Okay,
Because in
So-
March, it's March sales. So March, they give it to them in April, then they have till the beginning of June to give us the money.
got it. So my question is this, so in March, if you look at the top blue line, which is non-home rule, and then the bottom light blue is non-home rule.
Yes. Mhm.
Walk me through again, like basically the non-home rule went down significantly
Yes.
for the month of March, yet we went up for the home rule piece. So
Yeah,
obviously there's
it seems like if you look the trend of the lines, it seems like May, which is February, people don't really go out and buy a lot because there's always a dip. So there was a dip and then there's always a spike up again. But the spike up was not nearly as much as it was last year. So May always dips.
No, but my question is, in June, you have one blue line going up significantly, you have the other blue line going down. So we have do you see that from the solid blue line, the top one is going up?
Yeah.
From May to
It goes
June.
up from May to June. It goes, yeah, it's going up a little bit, but not nearly as much as the gray line, which is the gray line is last year.
I know, but why is the
Yeah.
the non-home
Oh.
rule going down when the other one's
Because
going-
the non-home rule, okay, because in March, the restaurants closed. Basically, and I think a lot of the retail ones closed. Those affect your non-home rule, and they were being offset by the grocery stores, because the grocery stores are only in the retail sales tax in that blue line. In the light blue line, grocery stores are not in there. So grocery stores, right when everything was closing, they were buying up everything. And so the grocery stores actually offset some of the declines. And the non-home rule sales tax does not have the grocery stores at all, do not have any of the groceries.
Okay,
So you'll see next in July, you'll see that non-home rule sales tax line is going to really, really plummet, because those don't have any of the groceries in there.
got it. Okay, so basically the regular sales tax, help me out here because I'm forgetting. So we
It's the
cannot
dark-
charge. What's that?
Yeah, that's the dark blue.
Yeah,
Is that-
yeah. So the dark blue is the normal one, right? So the
Yeah,
dark
John, we're
blue-
not charging on the food, and that's at the grocery store. We are charging on general sales.
Yeah, so just so I understand, on the regular, which is the dark blue, the grocery store with food that is not prepackaged, we're still getting that percent, but what you're saying is on the non-home rule, we do not.
We never, yeah, we do
Right.
not get that 1%, yes.
But we do it for the regular sales tax, we do.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
got it, yeah, all right. Okay. Sorry to take us down that rabbit hole, but any other questions or comments for Chris? Does anyone have any comments? I mean, Chris, I agree with you as far as, hey, let's keep saving for a rainy day, considering we don't know how much more rain is coming. We could have another second wave of COVID. We could have, our September, October, November could look like our February, April, and May of this year. So I agree with, keeping that money there. It's not going to disappear unless we do have, some more financial shortfall. So I don't know if any other trustees have any other comments or questions
Well,
for Chris.
we did make the comment, Chris pointed out, that the MFT funds went down by 77,000. But I think in the Illinois Municipal League publication, they're talking somewhere between 20 and 30% So Chris, does the 77,000, what percentage to our normal gross is that? You know, the
About right.
reduction or what is it versus what?
It's,
what's-
Or-
is it-
that it's about 19%.
There you go. So that's the point I wanted to let you know, because when we talk about dollar amounts, you know, the significance is it represents differently because it's a smaller amount of money. But 20% is the MFT cut. They were talking 30, so it's not as bad as they thought. And the only reason I'm bringing that up is because we did reduce our street program accordingly. So we should still be in line because if you remember, we cut our street program, I think it was 200,000 out of 1.2, we went down to 1, representing the same 20%. So we should be on target is my point.
Yeah, I believe when we first got together, Rick, I know you're involved, smaller group of us. We were looking at a bigger revenue hit, especially on sales tax. Because we were looking at both the hit on sales tax as well as income tax. Income tax is probably still to be determined, but I'm kind of surprised that how sales tax is hung in there, especially for the
Well,
months
you know,
February, March.
another thing that we haven't really identified, I don't think, or talked about anyway, Chris, maybe you have a handle on it, but they did, you know, they passed the tax on the internet. So I wonder how much we're collecting off of sales tax from internet versus what we would have normally collected at the store.
Has that started though, Rick?
Well, I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
No, the true, no, it really starts January 1st of 2021. But
Okay.
that will then go from, and our local use tax that will go down, but not nearly as much because it's up per capita. But our local use tax is actually up. That's because people are going, we collected last year on local use tax 487,000. This year we collected 569,000. So it
What does
has
that
gone
mean?
up because the local use tax is when you buy online and you pay the tax, because you do pay tax. They don't right now. In January they will do it, but right now they don't identify which community it's for. So it just goes into a big pot, and then it gets divvied up based on per capita. And so that pot is really large right now because everybody's doing everything online. So, but in January, it will say, you know, this resident from Lamont purchased this, so you should be getting it. So, but it's not really going to hit us until January.
Well, I guess relatively speaking, what I was getting at though is that internet sales is increasing as brick and mortar sales go down. So
Correct.
Hopefully they offset, they may even increase because people are doing more online ordering.
Correct.
And we still don't have April's numbers. That'll be, July will be important. Next month's committee of the whole will have April's numbers. The entire month of April was pretty much shut down. But we also have, you know, industrial sales taxes, concrete, mulch. So maybe we won't be that bad. So it'll be
Right.
the good and the bad.
Yeah, I guess you're right. We really didn't shut it down until mid-March, right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah, I guess, yeah, that would be the first month without it.
But
so.
could we, how many of our, I'm just wondering if we could do a comparison to last year though, to say, you know, to kind of put that in perspective of what it actually means, because we know what last year the businesses that are impacted and which ones aren't. And is there a way for us to just kind of do a quick estimation that says this was an impacted business and this was not? To say 40% of our business sales tax revenue is impacted versus, you know, kind of to give us a ballpark on that. Do you see where my
That's
thought
the-
process is?
If it's at the point of like, because we all know Target probably increased their sales by 150, 200% based on the hoarding and the people have nothing else to do. So I would go with you, Dave, and say, yeah, compared to everybody else, they probably picked up where everybody else fell off.
The only problem is you don't have, like, the Pete's was not here last year. And they, so you have a couple stores that were not here last year that were doing very well. So to go through, the list is huge to go through them to figure it out. And
Yeah,
3
Dave,
weeks,
your
we're gonna
point is,
have the
Dave,
numbers.
Dave, your point is you got 5 or 6 stores that make up a big chunk of it. Kohl's, that was impacted. Target, probably not.
What I'm saying, yeah, John, what I'm thinking is we have 100 businesses in town. I can go through quickly and say, this business was shut down, or this business is still open, to say we had 40% of our businesses shut down. That's all I'm looking for, is like a quick, I get there's new businesses, Pete's going to be different, Target sales are going to go up, but what I don't really understand, have a good gauge on is when I look at what closed in town, what's been closed through April, what percentage of our revenue of businesses has been closed? And I'm just looking at it from last year to this year. I get it's different, but is it only 10% of the business that are closed, or completely, versus open in some form, like 3 Corners is open in some form?
Yeah, Dave, I think it's simpler than that, Dave. I mean, you have the big businesses make up the biggest chunk. I'm talking dollar percent.
Yeah, right.
So if you just looked at Kohl's, Jewel, Pete's, Target, obviously Office Max is gone now. I mean, if you just look, Chris, at the top,
Like 20%, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you could lump the other 90 or whatever and just say, hey, you know what? They're all closed. So I think it's an easier project than that, but yeah.
I can take a look at it, but the spreadsheet it's 302 businesses
Well, what
are out there and they're there, but we could do that.
What are we trying to answer? The reduction in income? Or are we trying to figure out how many businesses were just closed?
Yeah, like,
what is the relevance?
oh, I think that it's the dollar impact on sales tax.
Okay.
Meaning,
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, I
think if I could jump in, as we prepared the budget for this year, Chris and I looked at this pretty hard. We do have a breakdown between sales tax and non-home rule sales tax, and we get from the state 10 categories: general merchandise, food, drinking, and eating. And so we looked at each of those categories, and for drinking and eating places, I think I recommended like an 80% drop, just because in March and April, when we're looking at this, the restaurants that were opening were telling me they're doing about 20 to 25% sales.
Right.
Food is, the Pete's and the whatnot, Jewel, give Jewel some love, and Selena's. But they do break out drinking and eating places, which is what I think a lot of us are talking about, the restaurants that were hit. And to be quite honest, Chris, that, eating and drinking isn't a huge chunk of our, if we do almost 2.2 million in our sales tax last year, drinking and eating places was 240,000 of it.
But then also, let me jump into, see, that's the thing, it's not all cut and dry either, because then you have also your mulch sales and you have your concrete sales. And a lot of people, during the time that we were shut down, we had increase in those type of sales because people were doing more. That's why we had the increase in permits. Because I asked other communities, did you have that much increase in permits? They're like, yes, because everybody's at home. And they're like, oh, let's go do this, let's go do that. And so, so that's why some of the stuff, it gets offset, because that stuff still gets taxed and they were still open.
Yeah, but that's kind of where I'm going, is like, and what John said was a good suggestion too. Give me the top 20 businesses of revenue and tell me which one of those are closed. I get Jason, I completely understand it. I think that's a good point. Restaurants weren't closed. I know they're going to be impacted. I know other places are going to be impacted, but what we can say in our top 20 is, was everything open that's in our top 20 in some way, shape, or form, or did some things close, right? I know we have nail salons and stuff like that. Those things don't really generate a lot of revenue. So them closing down doesn't really have an impact to us. That's why John's point of saying, hey, let's scale it to the top 30 businesses and say open, closed, or we could even go in and say open normal, closed, or open reduced sales, right, or something like that, just to get a gauge. It's just a gauge. I mean, to me, it's a 20-minute exercise. I'm not looking for a 2-day exercise. It's really, you know, a really rough estimate to.
Hey, Trustee Meyer, I know that the next steps we talked about is having a pretty good July meeting and schedule your vacations now. We're talking pension in July, everybody. We're also going to have all that data in July. I think we can do the 20-minute exercise, but we're going to have really good data. We're going to know exactly who went down, who stayed up, how much everyone made, and then that'll be a good springboard into transitioning to a calendar year budget. The other thing we won't know in July is how long will the drop in sales be? Will there be another wave, as the mayor mentioned, or there's another shutdowns? But we'll have really good data in July. Right now, it's a lot of guessing, but we could do that, or we can wait till July, or we could do a combination of both.
All right, sounds good.
I don't care if you guys wait till July. That's fine with me. I'm not looking for it to be a lot of work, so.
No, I just think it's going to be, it's going to be a lot of like, what ifs, but this, but that. And we're going to have really good data, I think, early July, right, Chris? I mean, usually those numbers come in and we love data. We'll plug it in. But, on the MFT, everything, our projections, the 20%, I think that was what we talked about for MFT and sales. And so far we're on there. And, no, we'll make a better estimate of it. And then July, we'll have really good numbers for everybody.
All right, sounds good. Next up, capital projects.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And let me just go through. I thought it'd be a good time as we are even a couple months into the budget year, and we're going to be looking at transitioning to a calendar year, to look at some of our projects and also talk about some of the projects that we're going to be issuing or applying for grants on. So I want to go through that with everybody. Many of our projects are already out the door. This is just from the budget that was just approved in April. Water main project went out, the motor fuel tax or the road program. A couple of these other projects will go out soon, Logan Dam, Buffett Harbor. A couple of those might even just be under my authority to move forward on, depending on how much we need to get done. Sewer lining, the water tower will more than likely wait a little bit longer. Still waiting for an answer from the church on they need to meet first, and I've been reaching out the last couple of weeks and seeing where they're at with that. So that'll probably get pushed off a little while too. But I want to go through. We talked a little bit about the non-home rule sales tax. One thing, we got a good email from a resident asking us about the 1%, and we'll send this out to everybody and even put it on our website. We went through this earlier today, but you can just see how we're being cautious and ramping up and how much we're spending out of the new road improvement fund or infrastructure fund, because we're essentially starting from close to zero. Let's try to build up a little bit of a fund balance, but you could see historically we spent about $400,000 on our road program. Last year we did 1.3 miles, about half, 500,000, and then this year we as Trustee Snagowski mentioned, we went from 1.2 to 1 million, and then the bids came in really low. So we're going to do about 800,000, but a lot of roads. And then you'll see that continue to ramp up over the coming years. Motor fuel tax, as Chris mentioned earlier, while it's going down in one regard, the state did approve as part of the capital budget a 3-year plan of $175,000 annually for the village. This is based on population, but our cut will be $175,000, and we received our first payment earlier this year. So things should even out, if not be in the positive, even with the decrease. State of Illinois, we talked about last meeting, the fast track program. We're applying for the rehab of the State Street Tower, and that was in the budget, but we're fortunate enough to get that award. We'll be able to reallocate those dollars elsewhere for a new project. State of Illinois Rebuild Illinois program. That was the public hearing we held last meeting. And again, those are good projects. They score pretty high. We'll know about how long, Chris, you think a few months before we know on these projects?
Yes. So we have to put it in for the ADA, the ramp, we have to put it in actually for the Rebuild Illinois program, because the fast track program, we we got the State Street Tower one in, we got in May into applying for it. And this one, we're gonna have to wait for the other one because that fast tracks program is closed because they had way too many applicants. So I'll put that one in, but yeah, we should be receiving the fast track, especially, we should be receiving word in the next couple weeks because they want it to be awarded and done in a year. The other one, it takes 2 years. So we should, we'll be putting that one in, and then we should hear probably in July or August on that one.
Okay, thanks, Chris. The other thing is part of the capital bill last year. If you recall, we went through with a fine tooth comb, and a lot of towns were specifically named on getting funding from the capital bill that was approved in the fall. We did not have anything specific, but through Senator Curran's office, he did notify us that there was money that he had allocated for Lamont. So we do have a project of $275,000 for a capital project. We will have to decide on this pretty quickly, so and we can kind of talk about that here in a little bit. But you know, it's got to be earmarked for facilities, potentially water mains, anything site improvement related. We have needs. We have facility needs, obviously water main. We might want to look at a project that, you know, essentially gets us closer to a bigger project, I guess you could say. So, we talked a little bit about Tri-Central. We're going to talk tomorrow night with the park board about the Tri-Central project, potentially running a water main out there to kind of provide some seed money for a bigger project that could bring people to town and be a good amenity for the village. But that's got to be, we got to decide within a few days. So maybe we'll go through the entire item here, and then we could talk about that allocation. In the recently approved budget that was approved, I think, a few weeks ago and signed by the governor, the village had a few specifically named projects in there for a little over, I think, close to $1 million, split up between general infrastructure to our water tower to just general infrastructure. So something we're going to have to, all good news with the capital bill and the state budget, and just start thinking about that, as this is new information really since we approved our capital budget that we can start talking about over the next few months. Other grant opportunities, I just want to make everybody aware, through the Southwest Conference of Mayors, that's where all the federal highway money is funneled through. And you apply through your Council of Government. This year, the majority of the projects will be funded. We'll be funding the grandfathered projects from the previous project list. And we do have one of those projects, McCarthy Road resurfacing. That should start in spring of 21. I know it keeps getting pushed, and last year the pot of money ran out and it got pushed again, but we're confident that's going to move forward. We did also apply for the resurfacing of State Street. Pretty good project, pretty much the entire stretch of town that we own, 127th Illinois. More than likely, that's a new project in the call for projects, and because there are so many grandfathered projects, more than likely even that project, which scored pretty high, will get pushed. Not a huge deal, but we'll just have to see how things shake out with our Council of Government. Other large projects that we're going to need funding, and I'll kind of go through a couple of them here today. I want to talk about the bike ped bridge briefly, because we're going to talk about it again tomorrow with the park board. Walker Road, rail safety improvements, I&M canal restoration, as much money as we're bringing in on a non-home rule sales tax level, we're going to need larger grants to move the needle on those projects. Couple of things that we did submit for Southwest Conference of Mayors that'll get be put as part of the this backlog of projects gets funded first, and then the next layer of projects we approved or we submitted. The bike ped bridge, it scored on the lower end. This is typically highway. These are highway grants. They deal a lot with pavement condition, things of that nature. So it didn't score the best. We'll probably have to look for other grant opportunities. Walker Road extension from Main Street north of the rail line, and also the provision of a new grade separation crossing, scored in the middle of the pack. Again, it's still a lot to work out. The mayor and the transportation committee for Southwest is going to be meeting here in July. We're going to understand where these get funded, or if they get pushed out even further.
George, I've got this is Rick. I have a question on that one again.
Yep.
Back to the Walker Road. I understand the road, the crossing. I thought the crossing was a reimbursable expense from the forge. Has that changed? Has our discussion changed? I mean, even if we're fronting the money, I thought it was a reimbursement.
Yeah, that's a good, and then maybe I'll just jump right there, Rick. It's a really complicated project. The Forge took a stab at it a couple of years ago with their own engineer and consulting company. Not saying they didn't do any work, but not a whole lot got accomplished. I'll just say that.
And I'm not talking about them. You know, you said they took a stab at it. I'm not even suggesting that they have to do that. But what I am suggesting is they have to pay for it.
Yeah,
that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and we've been working with an engineer from a concept level to see what can happen. Sorry, my computer's going crazy.
Okay.
And I'll pull this up here real quick. Walker Road there's a lot packed into this project. Obviously, and yeah, I have my cursor is where the Forge's property is. That was going to be phase one. Since the crossing it was going to take forever, they moved their phasing, switched it up, and now they're, as we all know, accessing off north of the Einem Canal. This will now be phase two. And not a whole lot has been done on the crossing, but we've engaged an engineer from a concept level to start looking at this and start engaging partners and how we could put it together. And you're right, Rick. I think that's what we got to talk about here tonight is this. While I think that this overall project is eligible and a great candidate for grant funding. It's got grade crossing. There's a lot of money out there. This is resolving many issues out here, safety related. Boyer and McGuire have accidents over the years. So it's resolving a lot of problems. I think there's a lot of funding opportunities. The ICC has even came in and said they would help fund part of a solution. Where we're going to run into a problem here is even in order to get this project going beyond a concept level, we have to engineer it. So we will have to approve a contract for phase one engineering to start this project formally, get your meetings with IDOT, work with the railroad, and that's going to be a costly contract. So that is something where I think this has potential not only for the Forge, but for the entire area, potentially to create a new trailhead, for the quarry area. I'll just go through it real quick, then I'll kind of turn it over. Basically, what we've been told by the ICC, primarily the ICC, the Canadian National has been involved in these meetings as well, is that the at-grade crossing that was originally planned for Walker is not going to be preferred from the ICC, and that means we probably should look at a different direction. And if we do, they'll actually fund a solution. They are recommending a overpass that goes over the tracks. So Walker Road would be extended, this blue line, it would go over the tracks. So, and with that, they are requiring the elimination of the Boyer and the McGuire crossings. And we talked a little bit last time about over the years about, Home Street. They're not particularly concerned with Home Street. That could stay open. They really want, these two pinch points here and these, liability concerns to be eliminated as part of this project. And we haven't got anything in writing yet, but on a couple Zoom meetings and we have a lot of interested partners who want to participate because they want to see those crossings go. Again, I don't know if is that what we need to move it to the next level. We need phase one engineering, which is going to be a costly project.
George, to Rick and for everyone, our last conversations, I think the conversations have been pretty consistent with the Forge. The Forge has said, hey, the village will not be out of pocket for this, for this project, for their entity, right? Obviously, it brings a lot of positive things to the village. We understand that. But, as far as I'm concerned, this bridge is going into the Forge, right? So unfortunately, we have to take the lead on this because if we don't, 3 or 4 years from now, if the Forge takes off, it's boy, gee, why didn't we, we've lost 3 or 4 years. If things do not take off, then obviously, we have to make plans for that. I think this conversation needs to start to evolve to, okay, if we're going to front this money on this type of engineering, how do we get recompensated back? And we talked to the Forge saying, hey, do you guys want us to move forward with this? They said, oh yeah, absolutely. We've not gotten into any conversation with them on how we get recompensated back. But they said, yes, we will and again, I didn't, there's been conversations out there, is it, do we bill them? Do we, look at potentially amusement tax? I mean, all of this, I think, is potentially on the table. We've never talking to them specifically about this, but I mean, George, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, Jeremy's always been pretty consistent and well, I shouldn't say, Bart as well, saying, hey, we'll pay our fair share of
Well,
whatever.
okay, you just said the magic word, John, because what this originally started off was they were going to pay for that crossing. At the most recent meeting I attended, we'll pay our fair share of the cost, which I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I'm just telling you it has changed. And in addition to that, then, if we have other partners who want to see the elimination of this crossing, well, then obviously they should also participate in that cost. And that includes not only the companies that are there further down at Boyer and whatever the other one is there, the one with the Marley or Maley or Bob Marley Road or whatever the hell it's called. Besides those businesses, we also have vacant properties there that are owned that will also benefit those owners. So if we're not going to be discussing what portion now the Forge is going to be taking on, as opposed to 100% reimbursement of an at-grade crossing, now we're building a bridge. We're talking at least a few $1 million here, not counting that engineering. I mean, this is a major, major project. So the question I have, and this goes back to the railroad then, George, is they are making the suggestion that they don't like the at-grade crossing. Well, then they are the ones who are adding all this cost because of what their preferred mechanism is, which is a bridge. So it goes from $1 million or $1.2 million to 3.5. Who fronts that? Who pays for that $2+ million difference? If the railroad wants it, they should pay for it. I mean, there's a lot of players making calls here, and it's not us.
No, and I think unfortunately, we're the ones who has to kind of lead the project. But
I don't have a problem with leading anything. So forget all that. Leading, fronting the engineering, I don't have a problem with any of that. What I have a problem with is the net cost of the village. That's what I want to know.
Yeah, no, we've heard from the ICC, like I mentioned, and we need to get some hard commitments, and where they have said at a meeting, and we've had multiple people there, that they will fund an overpass touchdown to touchdown. And they said, if you want to put lights and pretty, flowers, that's
okay.
on you. But so that was a huge, when we heard that, Canadian National needs to come to the table as well.
That is a big deal.
And we've applied through a grade crossing separation program through the state. So yeah, no, we absolutely, we need to put together, many different partners need to pay for this project. It can't be the village. I mean, the only thing we could at some point, TIF this area if it qualifies and make sure any dollars we put out get reimbursed to the village. It's another option.
I guess what I'm seeing is, though, there should be some agreement on percentage of value, whatever that is. So then if it's $2 million, everybody can figure out what's my portion based on my commitment of percentage. Mm-hmm. And then when you get the total cost, you know where you're at. But this moving target, and I'm in for all, I'm only in for my portion. It's always moving. I don't know what the hell we're talking about half of the time. But we're always leading. I know that. We're always going to take the lead. We're always going to do the engineering. We're always going to do this.
So how much is phase one engineering?
Whatever commitment did we get on building phase one that is now phase two? I mean, we could build the damn thing and that may never happen. So I agree that there needs to be the benefit needs to be spread to the other businesses.
Yeah, no, and I think, I'll answer your question, Dave, here in a second. They, this probably deserves a whole nother meeting when we have, our engineer in here to talk about it. We've we would apply for, well, we already did through Southwest Phase 2 and 3 engineering and construction. So we'll apply for Cook County, also some federal programs, ICC. So we'll try to put it all together, try to match it the best we can to get it going. It's going to be similar to the bridge project. It's going to be 100% on us to start unless we get it from the Forge or somebody else. That total bill, based on number of hours, is about 490,000 for Phase 1 engineering. I mean, you're talking. I mean, Rick, you said 3 or 4 million. I mean, this is going to be probably 7 or 8 million this for overpass and. Last thing we want to do is engineer something that can never be built. So I think if we move forward with those projects, there's checkpoints where the project could be abandoned if it doesn't go anywhere. I mean, obviously, that would be my intention. I don't want, to engineer something fully that can't be built.
Right. Well, here's also what Dave, I didn't forget you're on standby there, but I'll close with this thought. I mean, we talked about our reduction in the road program this year. We also talked then that we saved a couple $100,000 just in the bid process. So that's $200,000 in the bid process that we expected to spend that we didn't. So now if we're going to start funding engineering, that could potentially be 400,000. Well, the way I'm looking at it, we got 50% of that paid for then. We need to start assigning those new dollars so we can move these things down the line and not look at it like we're starting at zero now because we thought we were going to spend 200,000 more than we did on the road program. So now we saved it. Let's move it over to this project that we think is important. Something like that, just in the planning process.
Yep.
Dave,
Yeah.
sorry.
No, that was, I'm just, we kept saying, oh, it's a lot of money. I didn't know what a lot of money is. So I'm just trying to figure that out. I agree with Rick's approach. I guess the one thing I feel like is that if we put this road in and this crossing in, from my perspective, it's 100% benefit from the Forge. And I think I'd like to see them have some skin in the game during the engineering. And I'm not saying they need to pay 50% or 40%, but I feel like they should pay something to show some kind of commitment on that engineering work.
That's what I was kind of getting at. We could get the percentage obligation committed to right now.
Right.
So that, okay, guys, we're going to move this forward engineering. It's going to cost us in whatever, in pieces. Just take 50% of it, that costs us 200 grand. Well, your portion is going to be whatever, 40% or 60 or whatever it is. And Joe Blow down the street there is going to pay 20 and the other guy is going to pay 35. So as we commit to these engineering costs, they know exactly what they're obligated to pay and they've already agreed that they're going to pay it ahead of time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree. And I also think, that could be the point where we talk about a tax. If they don't have money to pay for it, well, we can come up with other ways to come up with their share, right?
Right.
John, that's what you keep saying, right?
Yeah, we need some mechanism. Yeah, I mean, that's what, Bart and Jeremy have said, it's like, hey, we don't want the village to come out. I mean, to their credit, they've been very upfront on this. They're like, hey, guys, we're not ready to move on Phase 2. But on the flips, which is, smart of them, they're like, hey, why spend or commit to anything? But our job as the village is to plan, right? So if this is something that is successful, we don't want to be 3 or 4 years behind. So we are kind of putting our neck out, right?
Well, in a lot of ways, John, I think, because while we all want them to be successful, the more successful they are, the bigger problem we're going to have with that traffic downtown. We're going to get eaten alive down there.
Yeah, right. Which makes this project, it alleviates that or helps alleviate.
Right.
Yeah.
I think
who else benefits? You said there's other landowners that'll benefit. If the bridge goes right into the Forge, is it just, how would the other landowners benefit from that bridge?
No, I wasn't saying that, Ken. I'm saying I don't know where the bridge is going to land. My point is, I know that Cullen's got property there, as well as what's his name? Oh shoot,
Brennan?
The one that,
Brennan.
Brennan, yeah, Bill has property. I mean, I'm just saying they have vacant property there. I think they both still own it. And anybody who's going to benefit by the crossing should be part of the game. That's all I'm saying. So
And they're, yeah, and I would say Colin and Brennan's benefit is if you got 500 parking spots here, then they have the opportunity to make their land a little more valuable for commercial.
Yeah.
right. And
honestly,
I
for
was
residential.
thinking that the crossing is going to benefit all the properties, not that anybody would be cut off from it or that it would, only land within the realm of the Forge property. I didn't mean that. And I don't know if that's what George meant. So
No, I mean, I to the mirrors, I mean, if phase one is really successful, you're gonna have, oh man, we need to get going on this phase two. And if we don't start it, it's 5 years out. And I think they've even said that obviously it's their preference that the parking be south of the canal. I think north of the canal is gonna be a problem for them, but also Lamonters who go out and just want to go fishing and
Right.
long term, it's better on the south. I would say this bridge, if it goes directly over and it kind of hugs the property line, it's going to benefit, west side and the other property owner at some point. They want to sell, or even if they stay active, there's major issues at those crossings. And last time we were at a call with the ICC, we kind of pressed them a little bit. Hey, we need to see something in writing because the village has no jurisdiction out here, right? Boyer, not our jurisdiction. McGuire, not our jurisdiction. These are not our licenses. And we're being the good guys here, trying to help everybody out. We need support, and I think that any more incidents out there is tragic, just like the last ones. I think a grand solution needs to be come up with, and we can't go at it alone. I think that's your point, Rick.
Yeah, and to follow up, George, to your point, all right, let's say, the Forge, fails. We don't want that to happen, but if it fails, what are we getting out of this, right? And I think there's some intrinsic things. We're gonna close 2 crossings, right? Which, hey, there's a big safety piece to this. I think we've had a couple of deaths already. Quiet zone, right? It's 2 less gates that require a quiet zone, right?
Mhm.
It gives us better trafficking into, because potentially, even though it's going to land just south of the I&M Canal, we could probably change the plans to it to get another bridge over the I&M Canal. I think that would be, if this is a $6 to $8 million project, I think that extra bridge is not going to be a substantial amount. Again, you're getting better traffic flow into the quarry area. Again, I'm just saying if the Forge fails. So there's some things
Well,
that, we could also.
inevitably, though, there's got to be a roadway built then to run east-west to those businesses, the ones that do have the crossings now.
Yep.
It would be contemplated for our reserve strip, and it's still early, but
Right.
otherwise you'd have to buy property. There's some wetland. I think the next map has, and this area is really tough. You have a wetland area. That's why it'll probably very easily qualify for a TIF, I'm sure. But yeah, it would be to run it along the reserve strip, with but the engineers will come up with something that protects bikers from the road, and maybe a trailhead, could be located there. So a lot of potential, but you're right. I think even if the Forge does fail, and we shouldn't be talking like that, bad omens, but there's real estate. This was talked about, I think 10, 15 years ago. How do we get across the Canadian National Tracks for development, right? There was going to be a housing development back here. So maybe it could be developed into something else with the crossing, but.
So George, what is the next step we're looking on this?
Well, I do have it. It was too late to get in the kind of the packet. I do have the phase 1 proposal I can send out to the group. I'd like to hear from you guys. I mean, is this something we want to take on to move forward? Because our engineer would need to start scheduling meetings with IDOT. We would have to get together with the Forge here soon. This is something I'm hearing is a priority for us to move forward on, but it is a lot of money. So I wanted to kind of talk to the group here tonight before.
So my opinion is I think it's a good to move forward on, but I think we need to get Forge skin in the game as part of it. So
Okay.
moving forward. It's a lot of money for us to upfront and Forge saying, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
So that's mine, but I think
Well,
there's value.
Yeah, short of not being out of business per se, business may not be quite of the magnitude that they'd like it to be, and it may come to a decision. Do we build this other parking lot?
Mhm.
Do we really need it? That could be a factor, and so I don't want to talk about failure, but by the same token, I'm concerned about the need for what was envisioned originally.
Yeah, they got that band shell they got out there too, and you're talking about 1,000 people leaving at the exact same time when they start doing concerts. So,
Yep, there's no doubt there's a traffic problem.
yep.
Hey, and one thing I don't want is, because we'll talk to the Forge and, these, maybe they're watching now, I don't know, but, is that, hey, we think we could do it a different way. This is the solution. We have to move forward so it's done right. And one thing with, this crossing, the reason why, and it was kind of crystallized with the ICC when they came in, why they wanted the overpass, is they are concerned with the success of the Forge. If it becomes really successful, you could have, some queuing here. Think about it. You have a long freight train on a Saturday. Now you have cars queuing back here on a Main Street. So the overpass is preferred from the ICC because they don't want that queuing to happen, and they want free flow of traffic. They don't like at-grade crossings. They haven't been handing them out very often lately. They want the overpass. So
And I also don't think they want pedestrians crossing the tracks.
correct.
So, and I'm not sure, the Forge has a decent amount of land on the south side of those tracks. So I don't think they want to eliminate all that potentially eliminate it all from parking. But obviously that's where we need to have a conversation with them and tell them this is the next step and this is what we want to do and this is where you want your commitment. I think that's the conversation we have.
That's a good point, because even during the preliminary planning of the project, the ICC they did not like the parking lot south of the tracks because of that purpose. They envisioned people walking.
I agree with Dave. We got to get some commitment from the Forge. The only reason we're having this conversation tonight is because the Forge is going in there, and that's why we were contemplating this bridge. So I think at least we got to get reimbursed, not now, but somewhere down the line for any money we're out of pocket. And I can't see why they wouldn't be on board, because it's a huge asset for those guys too.
And as the mayor mentioned, I think if you wanted to go down the path of quiet zones, this really is where you start. So once you start, this gets put into play, then you could make improvements elsewhere with some grant money. But I think getting rid of these two crossings is huge. So we'll continue.
And George, really though, we can't go quiet zone until we get rid of those two crossings because they're not our crossings, right?
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, in all those conversations we're having where we talk about it, we either got to incorporate this land, right, annex this land into our property and take control of those roads, or we got to get rid of those crossings, it seems to me. So, okay, thanks.
Absolutely. Cool. So we kind of skipped around the other one.
Hey, George, real quick, Rick, because this is a kind of a big, issue, and we're going to talk more about it. Ron or Janelle, do you guys have any comments on this or any issues?
No, none here. I'm with Rick and Dave on this.
I also am with Rick and Dave.
Okay. All right, cool. Go ahead, George.
Well, I just I texted Jason because the other thing we're going to be talking about, obviously Tri-Central with the Park District tomorrow. We wanted to unveil to them kind of our plans for the bike bridge, another project we're working on. And I don't know if Jason, if you're on here, you're unmuted. If you want to go through, I did load up just to give you guys an idea of what we're going to go through tomorrow, and it's also timely with how do we line up federal funding for some of these projects, because this one's just as expensive probably. But Jason, you want to go and see what we've been working on?
Yeah, thanks, guys. So this is sort of a first look at a potential bridge for bike and pedestrians crossing the Sanitary and Ship Canal. As you likely know, the Coast Guard gave us a curveball there. They don't consider the BNSF bridge to be fixed. They consider it movable. And so they said any bike bridge would have to have the height of technically the Lamont Road Bridge, which is about 50 feet above water. It can be done. And so this plan, looking from, I'll say, as I stare at the screen, from right to left, but that's from sort of north to south. It starts at the Centennial Trail there. That's below the Lamont Road Bridge, and snakes its way across MWRD property that is owned by Ozinga, or I'm sorry, leased by Ozinga. And it takes this kind of odd route because it needs so much space to maintain the grade that's comfortable for cyclists and still get at 50 feet over the water, and that's about 30 feet over the land there. So it would cross, and then when it touches down on the south bank of the Sanitarian Ship Canal, there's more space there. That's what's known as the Tri-Central property to the west of that or above the, and so they just show a big loop that would take you down. Those kind of loops you'll see off of, say, Route 83, connecting to the Centennial and the I&M Trail. So that's pretty common in this area. We did look at potentially trying to get onto the Lamont Road Bridge from here without having to cross Lamont Road itself. It's not that high here on, but the Lamont Road Bridge, what IDOT is telling us is it's not designed for cyclists, even though that's mainly all it's being used by, that it's not wide enough to be a multi-use trail. And then we'd also have to address, if you did get up on there, do you want to take people to end at Illinois Street, or would we want people to be able to get off that bridge sooner? But it is something that we're kind of keeping in the back of our mind as we look at this. So Terra Engineering came up with sort of the plan to get up and over. They're working with John Ronan, who is the architect for phase 2 of the Forge. So, he just sent these to Terra. We didn't even have a conversation with the architect itself, but just some preliminary ideas about, kind of what he'd be thinking about the part of the bridge that spans the canal where you would need some protection. One of the things we talked about with this project is creating something that's architecturally significant. You can't avoid it if we go forward with it. It's 50 feet in the air. It's right next to the Lamont Road Bridge. So it would be very visible. It'd become, sort of a iconic structure. And, you see here as George kind of goes through, Ronan design vocabulary tends to use industrial materials. He has sort of a modernist aesthetic. So here he's using rebar, wire mesh, and other kind of industrial materials. Again, that plays with what the Forge is doing and creating that sort of the container and steel industrial look. So that's the first shot at it. Happy to take comments or whatnot. George, I don't know if you registered yet, but the engineer that we engaged, David Landwehr from Terra, he will be on the call tomorrow evening.
Yeah, and you'll see very early on, we just had to make sure that they coordinated with the Park District's architect to make sure they're not planning for this area. But this would be, you almost could put parking underneath here, right, Jason? This would be elevated.
Yeah, I think that's where they're planning to put parking. Yeah, so you'd have that kind of circling it.
Yeah.
Hey, Jason, we're talking with Ozinga, seeing that's on their property also? They're on board?
They are on board, yes.
Awesome.
They're not paying for it, but they're.
Yeah. We haven't called it the Ozinga Bridge yet.
And
Whatever it takes.
So Jason, just like going back in time, I think when we originally started out, the bridge was in the $1 million or $2 million range. We found out that, we tried working through Lipinski's office, the Coast Guard, right? You got a great email back from the Coast Guard, very passive aggressive, right, to say the least, like, hey, sorry, we can't take care of your little bike bridge unless it's, as tall as the Lamont Bridge. So, and now the idea is there's still a possibility to move forward with this, right, George, if we go through federal funding, which means what? We're on the hook for what percentage?
Well, for Southwest, I mean, if we were fortunate enough, we'd be on the hook for 20%. Again, it didn't score high on that one. There's going to have to be other grants potentially, but that's really not we threw it out there just for a lottery ticket. That's really more geared towards highways and pavement. But there are other grant opportunities that more than likely from the federal level, although there could be some state stuff.
I mean, we're not cutting a check for the full amount. I mean, we'd only be involved if it was like a percentage, a 20%. At least that's my personal take on it. Is okay. How do we, if it's a major project like that, again, to me, this is something that is recreation. This is something again that will feed with the forge and feed off the forge. Again, I kind of lump this into, our recreation funding. But again, I'm not on board unless, we're somehow able to work, again, we have to have further conversations with the forge on this. And again, I think this project is successful with or without the forge, but I think, with the forge being successful, it helps them out and it helps us out as well. When would we hear about if this makes the cut, George, with STP funding?
Probably July, they're having a committee meeting, but what I've talked to Kelsey today or yesterday about it, and what day is today? No, this is probably Friday. She basically, there are 20 grandfathered projects that still have to work their way through. And a lot of them are pie in the sky projects that'll never go anywhere. So she's working to get those removed, and then they get to the new set of projects. And so we'll know more in July, but there's a backlog for funding.
Got it.
Hey,
Yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry, Jason, have you talked to Lipinski? Has anyone talked to Lipinski's office lately? Like on this specific thing?
I talked to, Alex had reached out to me, and then, like a lobbyist that works with Lipinski did as well. And so I sent some information over. What they're interested in, it was the proximity to the BNSF bridge. Because we do want to use the Stephen Street right of way there, Old Lamont Road Bridge, I guess. What helps us cross here is the village owns right of way or has jurisdictional right of way over the canal, and even the MWRD acknowledges that we have right of way here. So we could put the bridge here. So yeah, we gave them the distance. I don't know, it was 250, 300 feet, maybe yards, I can't remember. But we did give them the distance between this bridge, the proposed bridge, and the BNSF bridge, as well as the clearance for the BNSF bridge. Those were the two questions they had asked. So we provided that to them a couple weeks ago.
Okay, the reason I ask is I was with him on Thursday, and his people seem to think there is no law that says it has to be 40 feet above the canal. They're researching it. They can't find any stipulation that says it. They think it might just be Coast Guard saying it.
That would be great. Yeah, it would save you $5 million or something.
So that's why I was wondering if you talked to him. I'm hoping to see him again in the next couple of weeks, but he brought it up to me, and he said, right now we can't find anything in the books that says it has to be that high. We think it's just the Coast Guard pushing on something because they don't want it there.
Yeah, and what I heard, and I think I've gone as far as I can. I talked to Coast Guard staff, and yeah, I think DC is elevating it to see if there's somebody
Okay.
that will kind of pay
Yeah.
attention to this. You know, the folks that are my peers there are
Yeah, no, I get it. I get, if we don't get help, then we can't go any further
Yeah.
than this unless somebody with cloud gives us some help. So I get it. I was just wondering if they had talked to you because I didn't know. Like
Yeah.
I said, he brought it up to me. I didn't bring it up to him, and he had told me he had Jason something. I don't know who the Jason guy is.
that's who I sent the information
Jason
to.
Tight. Yeah, we had a call with him and he wanted to better understand it so he could lead these conversations with the Coast Guard and Lipinski's office. So we explained it to him. We showed him the wonderful email that Jason got. He kind of laughed and bureaucratic beatdown. We all dream of sending those emails, right, Jason? But no, but I think you're right. It needs to be elevated and they're willing to help. And I think then it becomes something that we could get a federal grant for. You know, you'd hate to spend $6 million of anybody's money and realize you could have spent it, you could have built it for 1 million, you know?
Right, exactly. Okay.
And I have a question. Doesn't the Army Corps have jurisdiction over that?
Coast Guard.
No,
Coast Guard, yeah.
Army Corps? Okay.
Coast Guard, yeah. Yeah.
Army Corps will have a say, and you know, you'll probably need a permit or an approval from them. But Coast Guard is the first hurdle.
Army Corps is the I&M Canal.
Next time I see him, I'll try to get more information too, guys. So I just was wondering, it was kind of a weird conversation I had, so.
I was glad to hear it, that they're working on it.
Yeah, Dave, I'll reach out as well. Why don't you and I connect? I haven't talked to him in, really since the election, unfortunately.
Yeah, like I said, he brought it up, John, so.
No, that's cool.
We'll see what we can do.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Anything else on this project? We'll bring it up tomorrow, and I think you could kind of see, we want to generate some excitement for Tri Central, and that's where if we put that grant money to use to do something to get the water main out there, because you're starting to see it now with Stephen Street getting resurfaced, and if we clean up the bridge and go a little bit further with resurfacing, really this area is not far from the rest of the downtown. It could be a really good improvement. We want the Park District to get excited with us. So.
George, to that point, what are we talking about tomorrow with them?
Well, we have Tri Central, and then we're going to be talking about this project, and then other potential downtown projects. We also wanted to have them just give us an update on what's happening with events for 2020. Obviously, with COVID, what do they have planned? Is there anything we can work with them on? People are itching to get out and celebrate something. And then I think we also had, we're going to talk about Kettering subdivision, maybe a little bit off topic of the downtown, but that they're ready to start planning a park area out there. They want to talk to us about improvements out there. And then I'm blanking on one other item I think we were going to chat about. And anything else you guys wanted to bring up. We did it last year and it was pretty successful. Anyways,
You wanted to talk about Bambrick.
Yeah, Bambrick Park as well. I know they're going to be improving Bambrick. So I think we want to be in tune on what they're doing out there because we want to run a water main out there at some point. Just and anything else you guys have any recommendations, let me know. But on Tri Central, maybe that's what the next step. MWRD is fine with us in the Park District jointly leasing that site, the 26 acres. So the next step is to show the district what we plan to do as a group, and that includes remediation to some extent. Phase 1 would probably be walking paths, a parking lot. Future phases include like maybe potential fields or a band shell. We'll go through that tomorrow, but it'd be good to get something going out there because the district MWRD has been really helpful. They want to get this thing going.
Okay.
Anything else on capital projects? And then we can kind of move on.
No, I'm good. Anything else you have to present on this, George, or no?
No, the only, I mentioned it, with all these projects, the bridge, Walker Road, I think at some point, we want to look at the I&M Canal again. You know, we're not going to be able to do it unless we get some federal funding, so we might want to look at some assistance in terms of, you know, like what we did with the Army Corps project, federal support on, you know, whether it be lobbyist services, consulting. There's money in Washington, there is money out there. So how do we at least get some of our projects funded? Because we can't do it locally. So. but that-
That's a good point. I mean, the I&M Canal, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of federal projects. And I know we've talked to Lipinski. Who was the guy we spoke with? Was it Jason Ty?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it might make sense. I mean, what are,
Well, you
I
know,
mean, it sounds to me you need to have someone in the know, and we're losing Lipinski, right? So,
yeah, and I think when you look at a project, like there's still money out there for water and sewer improvements, whether it be upsizing water mains. I mean, we still have, you know, other projects of that nature. The I&M Canal, I talked to Jason Ty a little bit about that project, and at the federal level, the programs are more agency specific. So a certain agency will get money, and then you have to work your way in to those agencies to get potential funding. The I&M Canal, we've gone down the route of, you know, engineering projects that don't go anywhere with the Army Corps. But, you know, the Army Corps might, you know, they have programs where if you get the grant, you work with them on designing a project, which if you're working with the agency that's permitting it, to me, that sounds to be, you're on the right path, you know, versus going down the path of engineering something and then the Army Corps says no. So little projects like that. And there's still a lot of money on rail that's out there, especially with Lipinski. He's still in office until January. You know, there's still a lot of rail money out there. So.
okay.
I think
All
with the I&M Canal, we got to maybe hook up with other municipalities, whether it's, you know, Lockport and with Willow Springs. Just the whole canal is all, you know, it's falling apart. It'd be ideal to get everybody involved. If you get more people involved, you might get more people to listen.
Yeah, good point.
Just feel it's totally neglected down there.
Ralph, we were talking a little bit during the last heavy rain period, during that storm, the 100-year storm or whatever we had. You know, the water came up really high and got up near, I think, over the banks by Pollyanna. And maybe there's a project on, you know, right now the water level goes up and down. You can't really control it. It either goes super dry or super wet. And there's got to be something that we get engineers involved to maybe come up with a solution. But then you get into permitting, you know, so this could be a strategy to kind of do it, is work with the Army Corps if there's a program out there.
Most of us just it's full of dead trees all the way down along the canal. It's an easy fix. We're not talking millions. A couple of 100,000 would clean up the whole canal. You're just pulling logs out of the canal. I don't know how hard that could be.
All right. Okay. Moving on, UDO amendments.
Hope we didn't put Mark to sleep here. I'll get to his slides and then. Mark's still there?
I'm here, George.
All right, there you go. Shouldn't have doubted you. Go ahead, Mark.
We can go ahead and move on to the next one, George. So our comprehensive plan does suggest that we look at doing some just general UDO amendments on an annual basis, and that's what we have for you tonight. We have generally kind of just 6 UDO amendments. I'll go through them one by one, and if there's any questions, comments, we can do them individually. That's how we handled this at the Planning and Zoning Commission back on June 3rd when we have the public hearing for this. That way, if there's a thought or a comment about the first item, don't want anybody to forget about it by the time we get to the end. So go ahead, George, if you want to move on to the next one. So our first proposed UDO amendment, and this is something that came up with recent discussion
with the Camden project was to change the duplex use from a permitted use in the R5A zoning district to a special use. So that's the proposed text amendment there. This was something that the Planning and Zoning Commission, there was no real discussion. They were all in favor of it. Again, any thoughts, questions, concerns about this?
Sounds good to me. I think that was what we talked about in with some of these developments that are going on. So I think that's on target.
Okay. All right, George. So the next one would also be an amendment to our use table. This one was some discussion about that we had as staff, at least, allowing banquet hall use as a use in the downtown. Right now, it's a prohibited use. It's not allowed at all. I provided the definition of the banquet hall there for you on the screen, just so we know what we're talking about here. Of course, I'm sure we're all familiar with them, but a venue for folks to have banquets for weddings and anniversary get-togethers when we can have these things at some point in the future. So the proposal would be to allow it as a special use, and the idea behind a special use, of course, would be it allows that extra level of review to ensure that the specific proposed banquet hall, if there is one, that we can look and make sure there's no, parking issues beyond just what the basic code requirement is, but we can really look at, parking or traffic circulation or any other noise nuisance issues. So any comments, concerns about this?
No, none negative, Mark. I'm just wondering how do we do it now with the banquet halls that are in operation? How were they granted?
In the downtown?
Yeah, for example, Joe Sassmo's upstairs, a Ladell.
Oh, yeah, I
Those banquet halls.
Those are accessory uses to the primary, principal use as restaurant. So, it's primarily a restaurant or tavern or some other principal use that is allowed, and then they ancillarily have some space for a banquet use that's generally allowable as an accessory use. But this would just, if the main use of the business is as a banquet hall, we can now allow it as
okay, got it. Thank you.
Not a problem. All right, George.
I have a question on that one real quick.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. I was just wondering, was there something that triggered this? Is there a business that's looking to put a banquet hall down there, or is this just what was the impetus of changing this?
I believe, Jason, not to put you on the spot, I think you had a call or an inquiry with somebody looking. So that got us looking at our code. I didn't personally speak with anybody about it, but I believe staff may have had some inquiry.
Yeah, in the past, before that, barrel vaulted building was on Canal Street was determined to be sort of structurally deficient. That was a conversation I had with a business owner. They were interested in a banquet hall, and there's a large vacant business in downtown right now, or vacant building that's also potentially interested. So it seemed like a use that was compatible. We looked at, again, as Trustee Stigowski said, there's people that have it sort of as a accessory to their principal use. Definitely a need, and as more people come downtown. So we wanted to kind of get out in front of it and not outright permit it so you could just walk in, but we thought a special use would be a good step so that when we had those conversations, we could at least give them some direction.
Okay, thank you. I'm okay with that. So thanks.
Okay. So the next item was a proposed change in the makeup of the technical review committee. To make sure everyone's on the same page with process, when a proposed development, when the developer first contacts staff, one of the first things that happens is we have a technical review committee meeting. This is something that we usually do for all requests that are probably going to come in as a plan unit development, or some other requests that is pretty significant, substantial. a vacant lot that's being developed with a brand new building. So like Kitty Academy is an example, not a plan unit development, but we still had a technical review committee meeting for it. And so with these meetings, again, it's a technical review committee, and the purpose of the TRCs on the screen there as well is Part B. It's a meeting intended to discuss process. It's intended to discuss technical matters relating to, so on a zoning end, setbacks and lot coverage and parking requirements. And, the village engineer and public works have representatives there talking about stormwater or water main sizes and those sorts of things. The code specifically designates and lists who's in the technical review committee, and staff kind of feels it's appropriate to maybe amend this because the makeup of the committee right now includes representatives from various taxing bodies, the township, the library district, the school districts, and the park districts. And they're not really a part of that technical review. And George, if you can go ahead and move on to the next screen. So staff suggested that we could amend the code to eliminate the requirement of those outside taxing bodies from being a part of the technical review committee. It's not that staff's intent is to completely cut them out of the process. Our original thought, my original thought was, when we schedule a public hearing, we could send out information about a project at that time. In addition, even when the agenda for a planning and zoning committee meeting is put out ahead of the scheduled meeting, those could also specifically be sent to the other taxing bodies, so they're still in the loop. And then, of course, common sense with, if there is a project that for some reason specifically warrants additional discussion with one of these groups, we can, of course, have those. So with staff, with our experience, it's unusual to have the outside taxing bodies in a technical meeting like that. It's actually, in my experience, unusual to even have the code list who's in this, or even have the code formally establish a group like this. In the other communities I've worked at prior to Lamont, it was just kind of an informal thing staff did, where a developer would give me a call or an email, or I'd meet with them, and we determine like the next step is to have a meeting. Who should we invite to the meeting? Oh, we need to get engineer, or we need to get the fire district in, and those sorts of things. So we just kind of handled it by common sense. So we did get some feedback from the school districts and the park district. The initial response from them was to not change it. They certainly want to be further involved in the process. The Planning and Zoning Commission did not really have strong opinions on this one way or the other. Certainly they recognize, as staff does as well, that we do want to keep these folks informed, and as part of the process, is it appropriate though to have them in part of the process early on with the technical meeting though? And so what the Planning and Zoning Commission did is, with staff's recommendation, they kind of altered that, and their recommendation would be to have them as optional attendees. We don't necessarily have perfect attendance from TRC members, so yeah, so that's where, again, these are very preliminary meetings. In many cases, the projects don't move forward anyway. So, staff feels that it makes the most sense to have the technical review committee be composed of, the individuals that would provide that technical guidance for the developer early on in the project.
John, sorry, do you want to ask questions?
No, go ahead, Dave.
I don't want to jump on. You can go first, John. It's it's probably more appropriate.
No, I think this is a culmination of feedback we've heard over the years, and just talking to other, developers or whatever. First of all, it is part of getting any development in town is it's I always call it's a sales cycle. That's what you're doing. You're selling the town, not literally, but you are you know, obviously want the best developments possible, right? So it's, you know, having that first meeting, you want it to be as productive as possible and not necessarily have it turn into something which it should not. And I'm not saying that, you know, happens all the time, but again, it's, you know, a lot of times first impression is, you know, the only impression. And the point is, you know, that we want to make these as productive as possible. Of course, we want everyone's input, you know, but we want it at the right time. And the right time is when these projects are more likely to be, first of all, you know, further down the road, because a lot of this stuff is just, it's ideas, right? And I just don't think, you know, that first meeting is appropriate to be getting into the details and so forth, so on. And I think what I've heard from, you know, at least staff is that, you know, a lot of times you're, you know, it's not productive and it could be time consuming. So I think getting their input is absolutely 100% needed. But I think we do it, you know, farther down the road. So that's my 2 cents on this.
You know, just to follow up, Mayor, and the first time, I just always assumed that, you know, everybody got invited to the first development meeting, and you know, and these meetings used to be really, really large, and I think Jason at some point, I don't know if we changed a process, or I got a complaint from a couple members of our environmental commission that kind of walked into the hornet's nest at one of their meetings, and they were upset that they weren't invited to the tech review. And I'm like, oh, I'll check into that right away. And I talked to Jason, just like, George, I'm just following the code. They're not even in. I'm like, well, who else is in the code? You know, it comes down to the board and how you guys want to handle your development review process. We're just kind of bringing these issues up. And, you know, I think timing is important. Many of these projects go nowhere, probably close to 50%, you know, because they get to the tech review and, you know, Jim Kankar, you know, brings something up regarding the Army Corps. Oh gosh, this is going to be too expensive. I'm gonna bail on this project, or now I have to alter it. And if you get a school district member or park early on and at one of these meetings, and it was 100 units, and now it turned into something completely different. You know, was that first meeting really productive to have everybody there, versus just trying to keep it more technical? Those meetings, a lot of times I don't attend them. They really are super technical, and at some point, you know, when a project becomes closer to being fully baked, before it goes to planning and zoning, you can send out a notice to everybody and say, hey, what are your comments? Sometimes it's counterproductive to have everybody there too early. Just my 2 thoughts, but really comes down to the board, how you guys want to handle the development review process.
So I'll kind of jump in a little bit. I'm looking at this, and I don't know exactly all the steps of the development process. However, I think planning and zoning is too late for some of these groups, not necessarily all of them, but some of them. I don't necessarily disagree with optional, but I think optional has to be defined. I don't think to me, the option is based on what the PUD is. As an example, if I have a residential development that needs a park, I think the park district should be involved during the technical review, because we're talking about placement of the park and all the things that are going on. Right. I mean, by the time you get to planning and zoning, it's too late. You're not in the placement of that park. But when I look at the school districts, when I look at the township, I would be open to knowing what their concerns would be. But when I look at the school districts, unless it's a larger development, you know, if we're talking about a 4-home PUD, I don't think there's any purpose of them being in there for the school districts or the library district for that matter. But if I'm talking about a Kettering, I think we absolutely need them in there. So to me, the township and the library make sense to me that they're optional. But really the park district is, you know, I look at that one, number one is any development that has any type of park, I feel like they should be in the tech review committee, because placement of park is huge. Kettering wanted to give, I just think of Kettering, they wanted to give basically the floodplain to the park district that was basically going to be unusable, and call that the parklands. So, and they were able to get to where at least that park district board was satisfactory land, which met their goals, which was, something that was somewhat flat, that can be, a more usable park, more centrally located, not off in the corner, and not a floodplain. So I feel like the park district to me is probably the most important one for anything, as a requirement. I don't want their opinion. I want them to know, and I don't want to. This is like what last thing what Rick said was, it comes to us in our board meeting. It's too, in my mind, it's too late for us to have that discussion. They're spending all this money. It's so late. I think in the tech review, we want to know what the placement is, what kind of park they want, what, those type of things. I think it's important for the park district specifically. Obviously the schools there's not a lot of land we have that impacts it, but that's my thought.
Yeah,
I
no,
wouldn't put
David,
park district in it.
And I think that makes sense. And then a lot of times what we'll do, even outside of a tech review, we'll bring in the park on a development. For example, Timber Run. I don't think they may not have come to the actual tech review because we talked to them prior. Hey, we have a big subdivision coming in. What do you think about the park? So, right, Mark, we reach out in those situations anyway. Correct. I guess just how do we put that in the code?
Yeah, or I mean, does it need to be in the code? But certainly, I totally agree with everything. It doesn't make much sense to, day of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting is the first time the park district finds out about a project where they're getting a park, right? I totally agree. Again, the thrust of these amendments are just for, a project like Timber Run. It was 6 months between when they went to technical review and when they went to planning and zoning. And during that time, there were some times when we thought maybe it wouldn't move forward. And so, big project like that, there is plenty of time there, after technical review or staff's following up with the applicant where, there's a reasonable time between definitely the park district, but, some of the other taxing bodies, if appropriate, to get them in. And, there was multiple other meetings beyond, that formal technical review committee meeting, other meetings that staff had with Taylor Morrison, for example. So, that's just not part of the formal process, these other meetings.
I just, sorry, I just want to jump in on there. But my concern is I want it defined, right? So what you're talking about is not saying where they're involved. And if I don't, right now I say where they're involved. So I'm comfortable that they're involved in the tech review committee because we have nowhere else where they're involved. Planning and zoning or close to planning and zoning in my mind is way too late, especially for the park district on bigger development. Sure. Timber Run, I think is a little different because we went through Vestancia for 2 years and had an idea of the park and what kind of park they wanted there. Then Taylor Morrison came in and didn't do a significant difference on the park. So if we're removing it, I think there has to be something spelled out that says we go to park. Again, I'm really concerned about the parks just because, they're involved in any development that has any type of substance. So,
no, that's a good point. We could always.
What is our minimum, Mark, for having a PUD? What is it, 20 acres?
20 acres or 40 units.
Yeah. So, Dave, maybe we could tie that to that limitation as a minimum.
Right. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
I don't want to tie it to every PUD because some PUDs are much smaller, but a PUD of that size, which triggers the PUD in the first place, would be a trigger to invite the park district, for example, or others. I don't know, but maybe.
Yeah, I'm fine with that because. I mean, we see four-person lots that are PUDs, but I'm fine if it's right. Like I said, I just want to make sure there's a certain size, and maybe that 40. I'm fine with that 40 for right now.
Well, we only have a couple more tracts of land that potentially could even qualify for that currently. So,
well, I think at a minimum, but another option. I'm just bringing up a example, and it's Phil Collins subdivision, Mark, out on 129th, 127th. Actually, it doesn't trigger that, but we definitely want the park district's input early on because it's one of these properties where it's fit in between other ones, and there is a park nearby, but there's going to be impact fees involved. So in those type of situations, we would get them involved too, right?
But in fairness, George, we had a TRC for that meeting, and the park district didn't attend.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if they don't attend, I think that the invite was given. So. And I believe that's this optional is more as invited, you know, what I mean? Not, you don't have to schedule your meeting around their availability. You send them an invite and, you know, it is optional, but they're not mandatorily need to be there where you're going to change the meeting date because they're not. Whatever, you know, district it is. That's my.
I think to Dave, to your point, we could, guys, we could put in the UDO if there's an impact on a park or potential impact, they need to be, you know, a specific meeting or invited to the TRC. I mean, something along those lines. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm fine with what Rick said, suggesting it for the minimum for a PUD. I'm fine with that. And then the other ones are there. I think that takes away ambiguity. I don't want ambiguity. You know, you just end up, you end up in an issue. And like I said, the Kettering one was a big issue when Kettering came in. So I remember that one.
I do have a question maybe for Mark or Jason with regard to having these there. Do you think there is more miscommunication moving forward because of the inclusion? Or do you think the miscommunication, we would be better off without them there to avoid a misunderstanding as we move forward? In other words, because it is so early in the game with pieces still being negotiated, they're there at the first meeting, but they're not at all the negotiations, and therefore what is talked about is what they heard and not what has been updated. You know what I'm saying? There's no way for them to keep pace. So I find it, if they're there too early, then it could become counterproductive also.
Yeah. I could, for sure.
Right.
I mean, we find that even happens between, say, Planning and Zoning Commission to what's finally approved. You know,
Yes.
generally we take the recommendations of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so the final project is not always necessarily what the PZC sees. So, yeah, I
Right.
think
And
there's
then,
a risk in that.
what I'm getting at is then the rumor mill starts about what
Right.
was talked about at the first meeting. And that's not even the case after the second meeting. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's what's being bantered about throughout the village, you know?
And to your point, not necessarily that there's a rumor mill, but you know, I think it's very important that you know, this will be approved by the village trustees. And so that, you know, I want to make sure that the trustees are engaged ahead of the other taxing bodies, to put it frank. You know, and occasionally elected officials have come to these meetings, and I don't think that's appropriate. And as you know, Mayor said, it's also about that first impression about what our development process is like in Lamont.
And that's why I was saying too, I'm okay adding another step. If you don't want them here, it has to be before planning and zonings, and I want it called out on what it is. So if we want it after technical review and we have governing body review or something like that, that's before planning and zoning. But to me, as a planning and zoning member, I wanted to know that the park district isn't happy with the land they got, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know. Now, it could be that we're okay with that as a village board, but you know, the last thing we want is to, again, have negotiations in the middle of our cow.
Yeah, no, it's a
before it's
no-brainer
coming to
to get the park district's feedback on, as Rick said, you know, anything that would trigger a residential PUD, 20 acres, 40 units. And very often we'll tell a developer or a builder, meet with the park directly, you know, and often they will meet with the park and their staff and even their board and come back to the village. Timber Run was one of these examples. Hey, here's what we agreed on with the park district. And we thought, that's great. We'll do that then, you know. So it works out pretty well when you bring them in early and get to introduce them and let them work on that piece together.
Yeah, and Jason, I know what's important, and Rick, you mentioned about the rumor mill, or I think it's important. These tech reviews are actually pre-application, so they don't get, no one gets triggered. Versus at application, we're pretty transparent. Mark puts it into our website, our GIS system, where any resident could see there's a development. If we have a pre-application meeting and someone at one of these tech reviews, talks to a resident and, hey, did you hear there's this development going on? When there's really no application, I think that could be counterproductive too. So we just have to come up with the right timing. Is it pre-application tech review? Is it just the engineers and the planners? And then is there another step? That's where we kind of definitely before planning and zoning.
Hey, George, it'd be nice if trustees would get a heads up also, obviously not during the tech review, but somewhere before the planning and zoning, just so we know what's coming down the pipeline also.
Yeah, and I think even the tech reviews, hey, there's a tech review here. You guys don't need to weigh in, but just so you know, especially if other taxing bodies are going to continue to be there, because that is my concern, is that things get out there and did you hear this? When really a tech review is really for the developer for like a free review. They get to hear from our engineer, they get to hear from our planners. It is really technical, obviously. Got what you need, Mark and Jason? Can you guys cook something up for the UDO amendment or?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Mark, anything else?
Oh, I have a few more UDO amendments. Not that many.
I
So
hope we don't spend 30 minutes on the
Yeah.
next couple.
What was the question, Mayor? What was the question?
Yeah. hope we don't either. So the next proposed amendment. This is a section of our code highlighted here from our non-conforming chapter in our code. And it's a requirement that for non-conforming multifamily uses in a single-family zoning district, that the transfer of ownership results in an inspection by the village code officials for basic health and safety violations. And this was something that came up in March because I had a realtor or broker, whomever, give me a call about a non-conforming use in the R4A. And I happened upon this language in the code, and it caused a lot of difficulties, more so than one would expect, in terms of conversations with the seller's attorney, buyer's attorney, again, the realtor I talked to. It was difficult just getting them to agree to have an inspection, so the sale almost fell apart. And that's not the main issue. It's partially as well, in talking with other staff in the department who've been around a lot longer than myself, this is something that's never been done. So as best as I can tell, it was put in the UDO maybe 12, 13, 14 years ago, put in the code, probably to address one specific one-time situation, and it's never been followed up upon. It's also difficult to track. We would have never have known. We don't have a transfer stamp program where all real estate transaction comes in and gets a transfer stamp from the village. So we're really just going on like what I had in my example, where a realtor gave me a call, prior to a sale. I'm sure there's many, if not dozens, of these transactions that have taken place over the last few years that have gone underneath our radar and should have gotten the inspection. And then a final reason why staff's suggesting, and our proposal is to just eliminate this from the code. Kind of the final reason is just kind of a fairness thing. A non-conforming use is by definition lawful. It's a law. It's a lot of times we say or hear the term legally non-conforming. That's redundant. A non-conforming use is legal. It was lawfully established. So we have a lawfully established use, non-conforming, but that requires an inspection upon a transfer of ownership. But in a different zoning district, something that's equally as lawful does not require an inspection if it happens to have, R6 zoning. So staff's proposing, just to make things simpler, to just eliminate this from the code. Again, the PZC, we discussed this a little bit. Mostly it was just trying to get at, what was that original intent? But again, the Planning and Zoning Commission, positive recommendation on this to just get rid of it from the code.
Mark, I've got a question.
Sure.
Buildings that people illegally convert to two flats, what happens then?
It's, again, it's, if it was not lawfully established, it's illegal. It's an illegal use. This does not change that in any way. So if the village were to get information that, you know, last month or 5 years ago, something in the R4A, for example, was illegally converted, the village still has the mechanism to pursue code enforcement with the, you know, other language in our non-conforming provisions of our code.
Is this basically something like that's grandfathered in, basically, or are we talking? We're not, like to Ron's point. It's not like we're somebody converts a single family to a 2-flat. That's not what we're talking about, correct?
Correct. That would be if the, you know, again, those would be things if they were not lawfully established. Okay. If it's not lawfully established, it's not non-conforming. It's just illegal. So nothing is changing whether or not something's illegal. So again, to use the R4A as an example, they were able to demonstrate that, you know, it was done many, many years ago and the zoning was different. You know, it was before the R4A existed, and there were many parts of the R4A that had R6 zoning at the time. However, if tomorrow somebody with R4A zoning converts their single family building into a multifamily building, that's illegal, period, end of story, regardless of this provision of the code.
The experience I had was on 2nd Street. The house was built, it was only 10 years old. He converted it to a 2-flat. He put it up for sale as a 2-flat. I reported it to the village and I talked to the realtor and said, you cannot do that.
Understood. But again, that would be one, it's a perfect example of that information being provided. You know, if something like that were to happen and it's provided to staff, we'd be able to still enforce the fact that that was something that was done not to code. It was wrong. It was illegal.
Well, I guess, Ron, is your point, though, that it was the inspection that brought that to attention?
No,
Or how else would you have known about it?
I was working as a realtor then and I saw it listed as a 2-flat and it's a block away from me, and it's on 2nd Street. They're working on, they're on a well. They have no fire hydrants and he turns it into a 2-flat. And anyway, it was.
I guess that is the point, though. Mark, as you said, it would be just illegal. The question is, how would anyone ever find out if that was even going on unless it was reported? This only brings attention to it because of the time of sale. I think that was the intent of this, is that there is no other way to find out if what, like Ron's description, how else would you ever know?
But again, actually, that's the point, is this was one where we did find out about it without this inspection, without a realtor saying, I have a client who's selling this and, you know, I need to confirm the zoning on it. I've had these conversations as well. I've called, you know, I've had someone bring to my attention property that was illegally being marketed as, you know, a multifamily use of some sort. And I've followed up with those brokers and had the listing changed. I've done that. So again, this code is saying something that's legal. Again, the code's about legal nonconformity, that we have a basic health and safety violation. Let's go in there and make sure their smoke detectors work.
Yeah,
that's what this provision of the code is about. Again, it has nothing to do with an illegal nonconformity.
Well, you bring up another point, because that was also discussed back years ago, is there are no inspections for those, as you said, smoke detectors, those types of things. There's no way to get into the buildings,
Sure.
was what we were told back then, other than to have these types of inspections. So
yeah, we're not doing them in the R6 though, even with a transfer.
Okay.
So I agree. You know, if that's, you know, something the village wants to do, is have a multifamily inspection program.
Yeah, there may, that's what I'm getting at. There may be other discussion here, but it's not about this particular topic. So I get it.
Another way to check on them is if they're on the tax records. If it's a 2-flat and they're paying for a single family residence as taxes, that's another way to check.
Yeah, Ron hit the nail on the head. That was another one with this where that was part of the, cases they were able to demonstrate a long period of, paying taxes, as a two flat. So, again, this would be, and part of it again is, if that realtor didn't pick up the phone to give me a call, or, called and I was out of the office, didn't bother to leave a voicemail, and then the transaction just took place. We have no mechanism for catching this. So for every one that we may have caught in the last decade that I caught in March, there's certainly a lot more that were not caught as well. So it's as a program, it's not a very effective program.
Got it.
So we're okay with this then, I think we're saying, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
All right. The next set of UDO amendments involves stormwater management. This is something staff's been working with Jim Kankar, the village engineer, on for some time now. Specifically, part of it had to do with MWRD updating some of their regulations, and we felt it would be appropriate to sort of bring ours in line with some of those changes. So specifically, the main changes to the stormwater management section of the code, like I said, primarily involves bringing it in line with MWRD. There's some reference to the Will County Watershed Management Ordinance. As we're all aware, we're in more than one county here. There was a change to the depth of the detention facilities. So previously the maximum depth, or currently the maximum depth, is 4 feet. This kind of brings in line with MWRD, which would allow a maximum depth of up to 6 feet, and then modifying detention basin slopes to 4 to 1. And then this brings actually an area where the code allowed 4 to 1 for certain types of detention, but only allowed a 5 to 1 slope to other types of detention. So this kind of brings it all in line as being that the village is comfortable with 4 to 1. George, next slide. I just put this here just in case there's some specific question about something. I'm not an engineer though. Specifically, these were written more or less by Jim. He told us what to change and we changed them and then sent them back to him to make sure they were all right. But what you can see crossed out, of course, is what's being eliminated, and what's in red is what's being added. George, next slide. We can, of course, come back to this one if there's a specific question. I'll try to.
I do have one question for you, Mark, or at least just a point to make. I understand the depth change from 4 to 6. That may or may not increase the volume, but if we're going to go to 6 feet, but then still have a 4 to 1 slope, square footage wise on the surface, on the top surface, it's going to require more area. So although the volume may go up because of the depth, the area may still be more. I didn't do a ratio study, but that would happen.
Yeah, that may happen. Again, these are just the basic requirements, and
Okay.
Up to the individual engineers to design, and then of course the Jim reviews, and plus they have to get their MWRD permits. So George, the next one. So just real quickly, the Planning and Zoning Commission, they supported all the proposed changes. We actually spent the amount of time at Planning and Zoning we spent discussing this was primarily on a recent project, the Camden project, if you recall, where they went ahead and put their stormwater detention on a residential lot, but in an easement. And the Planning and Zoning Commission, didn't really like that. So they suggested that for residential development, the stormwater detention area should be in an outlot, but if they put it on a lot, that we could change the code so that if it is in an easement on a lot, that we exclude it from the lot area calculation. And staff felt that that was a good suggestion. That was kind of a loophole that they were able to kind of take advantage of with the Camden one. So that's something that we could put in place as well. Any other questions?
What was the engineer's take on all this?
George, if you could actually go back to the first one here. I have Jim's letter that he did send to us. Again, he was again, he basically, Jamie, Jason, we're not engineers, and this is an engineering, design aspect. So we just heavily relied on Jim on this. We felt it's his responsibility as the village engineer, that the village regulations related to this sort of engineering, stormwater, we should defer to his judgment. So he's obviously entirely in support of these changes. And in terms of the detention depth and the slopes, again, he's entirely in support of them.
Can I butt in?
Yes.
Yeah, so I discussed this with Jim, and number one, we can't obviously argue with the MWRD, but at some point, maybe 15 years ago, we were at 4-1. It was changed to 5-1. I don't know why, but I have no issues with any of this as far as maintenance or stormwater release.
I'll add, Ralph, to your point. Before this change, the code actually said for any changes in depth, you needed to get the approval of the public works director and the village engineer. And that was amended out entirely. So we kind of looked back at that and said, okay, village engineer, what should these rules be? The planners aren't making them anymore. We're not counting on ecologists to make these rules anymore. What
Right.
makes sense from an engineering perspective? And so that's what we want to accomplish
I don't
here.
even know who the ecologist was.
I do.
All right. I got one more. This one's really simple. Scrivener's errors, just in our appendix B. This is under some submittal requirements. There's some language about a market research study that in the text of it references the traffic study, which is incorrect. Same thing with the economic impact study. So we just wanted to fix those. That one's simple. And that's all of our UDO amendments.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's always fun to talk UDO code.
Hey, Mark, and not to
Yep.
put you on the spot here, when was the last time, or maybe Jason, have we required that economic impact study? Because we always waive it. I guess should we be looking at different ways to when that's required, or leave it in there for our discretion? What do you recommend?
I think it's good to have discretion there.
In case there's a big enough development. Okay.
All right. That is it, except for any unfinished, and by the way, we are going into executive session briefly, but before we get there, unfinished or new business, anyone on the board?
No.
Next up, we got audience participation. George, take it over.
Yeah, this is the section of the agenda where audience can speak. So please just put your hand in the air. I think give you a couple seconds here, and you'll be able to. There's nobody on here that I think would want to, unless the chief wants to say something, but I doubt it. Jerry Johnson's here. Nothing, Jerry?
All right. Okay, with that being said, we are going to go into executive session for a brief moment, I promise, under section 2C11. I need a motion, correct, George?
Yeah, motion, and then
So moved.
Second.
You could do a voice vote. I think last time
Okay.
we were only for
Yeah.
votes, actual votes on agenda items. You need them.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, we will go into executive session. George, how are you going?